In this episode of Hey Guys Assembly, I drive to Birmingham, Alabama to visit Sloss Furnaces National Historic Landmark. It's a landmark because of its pioneering role in the American Industrial Revolution and also because the iron industry turned Birmingham into a major city in the southeastern United States. I'll show you the visitor center to learn about the history of Sloss Furnaces. Then take a self-guided tour through those furnaces to see how massive this factory is. Then I'll also talk about some of the interesting rumors about paranormal activity here. I'm going to check out some Alabama history. Let's go! Look at the train going over the road. Sloss Furnaces is not quite off the interstate, so I had to take some side roads to get there. Here's a map of where I'll be on this episode. This Google Earth animation will zoom in just about in the center of Alabama, in the state's largest city of Birmingham. Sloss Furnaces National Historic Landmark is located just east of downtown, and you can see how large this old factory is, taking up several square blocks. And you see not one, but two railroad lines next to the factory. On this video, I'll mention the owner of the factory used his influence to construct these railroad lines through Birmingham. You can see some of the skyscrapers in the distance from downtown. Downtown is about a mile or so west from here, swinging around, and this is the old iron factory, which is now used by artisans to make metal sculptures. This facility was developed by Colonel James Withers Sloss, one of the founders of the city of Birmingham. Sloss also helped to bring railroad development across Alabama, including through Birmingham. This iron and steel processing facility is along that railroad line. The site was in operation from 1882 to 1971 and was targeted for demolition after that, but instead was cleaned and restored and eventually converted into a National Historic Landmark in 1981. There's a visitor center next to the furnaces. There is some good information on the history of the iron industry in Birmingham. There are some informational placards over here. The first one is about James Sloss. He was born in northern Alabama and led the Industrial Revolution in the state of Alabama and pioneered the development of pig iron using resources found in Birmingham. The pig iron processing industry, combined with building Sloss Furnaces next to the railroad line that he pushed through, led to Birmingham becoming a major city in the southeastern U.S. This led to other mining and transportation industries. James Sloss was one of the most influential people in Alabama history. There's some sculptures on display here. This one is called Toiled, which was created in 2021. Here's another interesting piece. Kinda looks like a metal cupcake that burst open. This is called Fresh Start. And this is called Form Study 1. Apparently this is for sale for $179. The placard on the left details the workers that were employed at this facility, working long hours in very hot and very dirty conditions of this factory. On the right, it notes this facility was considered innovative at the time. 17 patents were filed due to furnace design and other inventions developed at this facility. However, in the 1950s, Birmingham had much air pollution from the iron and steel industries, and Sloss Furnaces became out of date and not in compliance with the U.S. Clean Air Act. The furnaces closed in 1971 and was targeted for demolition, but preservationists successfully converted the site into a historic landmark. Birmingham had a number of amateur baseball teams formed from factory workers. Those teams were part of the Industrial League, and that league rivaled that of Major League Baseball. Some more displays in a back room. This describes what flux is, and they use calcium carbonate, which is an antacid ingredient. Over here, this describes what and where iron ore is. Here are some of the ingredients used to make pig iron, which are prevalent in the Birmingham area. On the left, the dark rocks are coke. Next to it is limestone, and then on the right is slag. On this table on the left is coal, and in the middle there's a large processed metal, which is pig iron, which is what they made at these furnaces. And to the right is iron ore. This display describes what coke is. It's a more pure form of coal that's used as fuel to operate the ovens at a temperature of up to 2,000 degrees. Coke was first used in the year 1709. Oh, and it's not the same as Coca-Cola or cocaine. Look at this interesting sculpture. I guess it's in this back room because it better shows its lit up eyes. I believe this was made by a sculpturist that works at Sloss Metal Arts, which was established here in 1985. Lots of great detail on the sculpture. Check out the braided hair. And what's interesting is how much detail was put into the hands and feet. They're almost realistic compared to the rest of the body. This facility is open from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Tuesday through Saturday. They do offer some guided tours, but the most popular option is to follow the signs and walk through the facility. Now inside the visitor center. Directly in front of me is where the artisans work, and what looks to be a very tall metal shed. There are signs throughout the property that show us the path we take through the furnaces. This place has all kinds of pipe running through here. I'm not sure what the little pipes on the right carried, maybe natural gas. Now to the main part of the old factory where the massive boilers are located. There are a total of 16 boilers, some built as early as 1910. The large drums are filled with water and burned and cleaned all the waste gas that was a byproduct of the iron making process. It's hard to believe these boilers were in use well over 100 years ago and used until the 1970s. Take a look at those openings where the coal went, which was used to heat up all the water in the boilers. This is definitely a massive factory. Those boilers are huge. Another byproduct of these boilers was steam, and that steam was used to power the blowing engines, turbo blowers, and machinery used in the powerhouse. Here's a marker describing how the boilers work. And also this notes that 6 men operated the boiler plant, including a foreman who was the manager, a fireman who was in charge of how hot the boilers got, and a laborer who moved ash waste by wheelbarrow to a pit. Lots of responsibility for just a few men. And it's definitely a lot of work. Long hours and being exposed to pollution day after day. Just walking through this old factory, I can smell the iron that was produced here. And even though this place was probably cleaned up after the factory closed back in the 70s, and before this place became a national landmark and open to the public for tours in the 80s. Now in the next section of the factory, the stock trestle where the trains pulled into, and the tunnel where the materials were moved under the factory. Those were used to carry iron ore, limestone, and coke to the furnaces. I'm gonna go see the tunnel. The raw materials were slid down that large contraption, kinda looks like a slide, and then those materials made their way down into the tunnel, which then ultimately took those materials to the boilers. Now walking to the tunnel, and the doorway is not very tall, so I have to walk through it.
Yeah, your back, that's true.
This creepy looking tunnel is used to transport materials under the factory.
You need to come down here. It's really cool.
I'm not gonna walk through there. Looks like some ladders that workers use to get to ground level. Now back on ground level, and this is what is called a ladle car. A ladle was used to transport and pour out molten metal and held up to 330 tons. This is a specialized train car that transported the metal on steel train tracks. Now I'm at the other end of the factory where the trains dropped off the raw materials. Swinging around, there is the elevator walkway between the blast ovens and the cast shed. Now I'm on the elevator walkway, and there's the skip hoist, the diagonal device that leads to the top of the furnace. There's where the raw materials are offloaded and placed on the hoist into containers called skip cars. The hoist was powered by steam from the furnaces. Before this automation, materials were taken in a vertical elevator and dumped into the furnace by hand. From the middle of the elevator walkway, I have a pretty good view of all the furnaces and all kinds of piping throughout this factory, as well as the blast ovens, the powerhouse, and the Sloss water tower, which was used as part of the cooling system. On the left of the water tower are 6 hot blast stoves, which use waste gas to heat the air before it is pumped into the furnace. The air was heated to 1400 degrees Fahrenheit. In this shot you can easily see 5 stoves, but behind the right stove is the 6th stove. Now inside the cast shed, and there's the marker inside. This reads, Racial Terrorism and Convict Leasing. This marker discusses how thousands of black people were the victims of lynching and racial violence after the Civil War and for decades later. Also, this very factory and other businesses across the South took part in convict leasing, which exploited black people. This is where state governments improperly charge them with vagrancy and loitering so they can sell their parole rights to businesses to get involuntary free labor. This practice was in use until the loophole in the 13th Amendment was closed in 1902. Now walking into the blowing engine building, which contains 2 large turbo blowers, which are small devices that were more efficient than the original blowers from the 1920s. This green machine is one of those turbo blowers. It was created by Ingersoll Rand and was put in use by Sloss in 1949 and 1951. It uses centrifugal force to pull air to the center of the machine, but they ran very hot. This building reached temperatures of 120 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer, and Birmingham in the summer is no joke. The original blowers were constructed in the early 1900s, and we'll see them in just a minute. Those blowers are very large and kept in a huge building. To compare, these blowers from around 1950 are far smaller. They are probably about 6 feet tall and about 20 feet long. They are also far more efficient and release far fewer pollutants. Today, the same blowers are much more powerful, much smaller, and more energy efficient. Here's a second blower that was installed around 1950. I'm making my way into the blowing engine, and you'll see how different the blowers were 50 years earlier. Here's a marker and a diagram of just one piece of the blowing engine. The engines are over 30 feet tall, and those wheels in the diagram are over 20 feet in diameter. One more look at the blower from 1950, and now let's see what the same blower engine looks like in about 1910. There's one of those wheels that are 20 feet in diameter. As you can see, this place is massive, but at the turn of the 20th century, this was considered an engineering marvel, and these blowers were a critical part of the American Industrial Revolution. This is also the oldest building at Sloss Furnaces. It was constructed around the year 1900. All those large wheels, all the piping, and all of these water pumps push the same amount of compressed air as one of those much smaller green engines that I saw earlier. This place also generated a lot of noise when operating, about the same decibel level as a rock concert. This is the powerhouse. It generated power for the plant as well as for the small worker community that lived on property. The powerhouse used steam from the boilers to power a generator, which then produced electrical current. I mentioned that the workers were often subjected to bad working conditions with very hot temperatures and 12-hour shifts. But the worst shift manager may have been James Slag Wormwood. Wormwood ran the graveyard shift for several years, and the workers were subject to abusive conditions. Possibly because the workers were primarily immigrant laborers, Wormwood knew the laborers needed work, so he was fine treating those workers extremely cruelly and inhumanely. 47 workers lost their lives during the shifts Wormwood had led, the most of any shift in the furnace's history. Also, there was a major explosion during his watch, and the eyes of 6 people were burned so badly they went blind. However, karma would eventually catch up to Wormwood. In October 1906, Wormwood slipped while at the top of one of the furnaces and fell into a pool of molten iron. But that may have just been a cover. One rumor has it that the workers revolted against Wormwood and threw his body in the furnace. The furnaces have also become a favorite place for ghost hunters. They believe the ghost of Slag Wormwood still haunts the furnaces. One night, a watchman in the 1920s claims to have been injured by being pushed from behind while a voice told him to get back to work. Then, in 1947, 3 supervisors were found unconscious and claimed a badly burned man approached them and shouted at them. And in 1971, the night watchman claimed he was pushed and beaten repeatedly by an evil half-man, half-demon. The man later died after succumbing to his injuries. His body was covered with burns. It's unclear how he was burned. Perhaps cashing in on the interest in the paranormal, Sloss Furnaces held an event called Fright Furnaces in September and October. The event ran from 1997 to 2019. In 2022, Sloss Furnaces decided to permanently discontinue the event because of the cost to host the event. They also wanted to present a more positive image of the furnaces by promoting the school tours as well as the artisan business Sloss Metal Arts. This is definitely an informative and educational place. Quite a bit of history, some good, some very bad, but all worth learning about. For high school or college students learning about the American Industrial Revolution, this is a great place to tour an actual factory and see some of the turn of the 20th century technology they use. This is also worth seeing for how poorly we have treated our own people in this country at the time. And although they don't go into any ghost or paranormal activity here, it's definitely interesting to read about the supposed ghost of Slag Wormwood. Also, I do wonder if Slag Wormwood actually slipped into a furnace while inspecting it, as was reported. Or was there really a mutiny here and the workers forcibly threw him into molten iron? Sloss Furnaces is free, there's no cost to tour the furnaces. So if your travels take you to Birmingham, Alabama, consider spending a couple hours at Sloss Furnaces. And that's it. I have many other videos featuring my travels in Alabama, so take a look at my YouTube playlist for more. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, bye!